Shabbat Shalom, everybody. This is Bill, and this is Torah Talk with Tony and Bill. It doesn't take a lot of wisdom on your part to see that I am alone up here in the microphone stand with the table and with all the good things here, but I'm not alone in the building. As a matter of fact, throughout the building, there are Tonys, and their actually names are not Tony, but today they're going to pretend to be, they're going to act like Tony. They're going to have Tony questions and comments for Torah Talks with Tony and Bill. They're Tonys. I'm Bill. They call me Papa B. So we've done the preliminaries. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I hope this is a blessing. This is live, so whatever happens, happens. We're going to have a good time. Tony, unfortunately, cannot be here today. There is a significant ox in his ditch, and he is taking care of that. Please pray for Tony and the ox in the ditch over there, in that regard. He's physically okay. Now, that being said, we are here to talk about Parsha Shemot, the first section, subdivision of the book of known in the Western world as Exodus. It's actually called Shemot, and it means at the core of, or the essence of who we are. English would translate it probably as names, but names don't mean to the Hebrews what they mean to an English person. A name has to do with more attribute and character and essential identity and purpose, as opposed to just a title we're called or a label that we wear or a moniker that is given to us by somebody. So we're in a section of Torah that consists of a new transition. We have been talking about the relationship of the Creator of the universe with certain people, Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and then Joseph primarily. We've talked about the era of the patriarchs, and as you all know, that ended last week. And so we're now entering into a new era, and that is the great era of nation building. The Creator says things like, Shalach et Ami. He says, I want you to tell Pharaoh, he tells Moshe to tell Pharaoh, Shalach et Ami, which usually in English we translate as let my people go. Now, I would say that shalach is not about letting you do anything. So letting sounds like it's like you have a kind of a tender feeling and you sort of just let them do this passively. It's not let my people go, it's send my people out. Shalach means to send by decree or by forceful effort, to send out, send forth. So what the Holy One's saying is, tell Pharaoh to send out forcefully my people. Now, the key factor there is people, and the pronoun that the Holy One uses, his pronoun is my. He says, my people. There is building, developing in this book. We're going to see the great birth, awakening, maturity, training, and releasing of this great people that he calls my people. This is the great nation that he promised Abraham he would build. I will make of you a great nation. So here we are in great nation building territory. This is the discussion we will be having for the next 11 weeks as we begin to really find out what are the details and what are the nuances of being my people, being the great nation of the Creator of the universe. The people of the more excellent way is the way I describe it. The rest of the peoples of the world, all the cultures, all the nations, and we would be the same if it weren't for the touch of the Master's hand upon our lives, are all based upon the best way men can think of, or the worst way men can think of, and they kind of flow in and out. Sometimes the best way men can think of turns into the worst way men can think of in a hurry. And sometimes all they can think about is the worst way you could treat other people, the worst way you could treat the environment, the worst way you could treat your planet that you live on, the worst way you could treat yourself. That's the way, sometimes the way cultures and ethnicities are based. But we are called to be a people of the more excellent way, a people who actually become shadows on earth of what has happened in heaven. So there is actually a foretaste of on earth as in heaven through the channel of our lives. We're called to be a people not more intelligent than other people, but more connected to the divine, more connected to the grand plan than other people. So that is what we're going to be doing for the next 11 weeks, discussing how this new people comes into existence, why it had to be birthed the way it was birthed. I mean, out of Egypt? Egypt was about as bad as you can get. as far as cultures go. I mean, not the fact that I'm going to say bad things about Egyptians. I'm just going to tell you that all the Ra, Shakot, and Hamas, all the evil, the violence, and the corruption of mankind had centered itself around the Nile River during the age in which all this is taking place. The Holy One didn't have us born somewhere in an incubator or in a sterile environment. He wanted this nation to be born out of the worst possible thing that humanity could throw at humanity, so that we would be able to experience it, understand it, and sympathize and empathize with it, and help people to overcome it, because we actually know what it feels like to be hated, know what it feels like to be attacked, know what it feels like to be this object of genocide, of suspicion, of hatred, of violence, of attacks, and dehumanizing words and comments. We have to know how that feels, or we can't be the people of a more excellent way, because we won't have empathy for those who we're called to bring that life force to. So with that being said, I'm going to kind of open up for my Tonys. Are there any Tonys that have any questions or any comments they want me to address? I got a little microphone set up in front of me that you can't see if you're watching, but that is very visible there, and I'm waiting for somebody to come and take that microphone and inquire or comment to me. So here we go. I see movement. Go ahead. Deb, you're okay. I'll introduce you to Deborah.
Well, we've been talking a little bit about Shemot, and the first thing that struck me in our conversations was the covenant blessing of keeping Torah and the prophetic empowerment that came from the Lord at Sinai, and the DNA thing that the Lord just put in his people. And as Brother spoke, there were 700 years in that first few verses of deep oppression and lack of revelation or really hearing, and yet still the people of God thrived and became a force to be reckoned with, and a threat to the status quo of Egypt and the way of life and the society and culture that they were called to be a counterculture to. And it's just the power of that, and the power of the way the Lord just infiltrates society with his people in every place, and they grow under persecution, and they grow under mistreatment and oppression. And everybody might think, this person is nothing but a slave. This person is nothing but someone born out of prostitution or some other thing. And the world looks at them like they are nobody, but they are a force of God to be reckoned with, and a light to the world, and that's who we're called to be.
Amen. Yeah, what Deb is just... Sorry. What Deb has just brought up is, and I hope you were able to hear that, we're trying something new, so I hope you on the listening audience will be able to hear what Deb said. She was referring to the strange way God has of taking people who seem to have no political power, clout, seem to be broken vessels, and yet making them relevant to their society and raising them up and giving them a voice and a testimony that actually changes the world. And so this idea of a people of the more excellent way does not mean that they're more educated or more intelligent in the natural way of thinking, not more scientific or more technologically based, not more moral in the sense of they're somehow they made their own personal way of being more moral people. These are people who just get connected somehow to the Creator of the universe and begin to receive downflows into their lives of wisdom from heaven, not wisdom of man, of kindness and mercy from the throne of grace, as opposed to arrogance and narcissism and judgmentalism from the world. or from religion, or from philosophy, or from political arguments. And instead, we see that the people that the Holy One calls us to arise are those usually who have been persecuted, who have been humbled, humiliated by life, been oppressed. And he says, thus are people I want to use because they understand the pain of other people. They will understand how far they've come and how much grace has been given to them, and be more likely to be able to channel that grace into other people's lives. So yes, we start the book of Exodus. The first few verses are showing how after Joseph died, after the death of Joseph, and the death of all the members of his family, things went very badly from a standpoint of the cultural milieu in which we lived. Everything turned darker and darker and darker, more obsessed with dark energy, more oppressive, more dark. But yet, in the midst of all that, the Holy One calls the people to multiply, to expand, and even to increase their influence by leaving Goshen and sharatzing, as it says in Hebrew, spreading forth into the nation, branching out into the nation of Egypt. So what we find is that we have this budding population, growing population of shepherds now suddenly being all over Egypt, in all the cities and all the villages. This more excellent way people haven't even learned the more excellent way yet, but there's something about the call of the Creator of the universe upon them that sets them apart, and you're either going to love them or you're going to hate them. And in the Egypt situation, Pharaoh's situation, the choice was made to hate, to fear, to suspect. It is not an uncommon response. Today, in today's world, we see that response over and over again. Now, somebody once told me how horrible Christian Zionists were. But I said to them, Christian Zionists may not be perfect, may have issues with their doctrines or whatever, I don't know, but I'll tell you this. I'd much rather be around a Christian Zionist than a Christian anti-Semite. If that makes any difference to you, I would rather be around a Christian Zionist than a Christian anti-Semite, because I at least know that I'm not going to be attacked and genocided by the Christian Zionist. On the other hand, I've seen what happened, and we've seen it in history, what happens whenever the Christian anti-Semitites or the non-Christian anti-Semites come after you. It's not a pretty present sight. Well, that's our kickoff point. Thank you, Deb, for that first comment or question. I'm going to go, who's next? What Tony is next? Elmer.
My mind's racing a lot as we're talking about this parasha this morning. And when we think about there's a more excellent way, that also implies that there's another way. I've talked about ways of that, but there's this.
A less excellent way? Yeah.
So there's a third way. And so my mind went back and made a comment this morning that really got me thinking that Pharaoh at this time of Moses wasn't probably have Moses as his, dual adopted grandson. And he probably did what he did Joseph. He dressed him. Because they couldn't see what, the force and all that, but dressed him, gave him the haircut, gave him the clothing, gave him the language, gave him the accent, everything to show that he was actually Egyptian.
Right.
And it's a cover-up. And I can see for myself how many times back then, it wasn't Sunday church, but I'm arguing with my wife. But then you walk in and you place on the smile, and you got your Bible, and so you see this cover-up. You see it in the political world, where you cover up for the children, and people in their cabinets. You see it in the religious world, where unfortunately some pastors cover up for staff members, even their children, they move from this ministry to this ministry, to this position. And all that person might live to a point, but we don't have to live that way. We can actually live in a more excellent way. And steal your thunder, but when we think about 10 commands and 10 words, there's more excellent way.
Yeah. Thank you, Elmer, for that. Exactly. And what Elmer may be referring to is stealing my thunder, if you would say that. I don't think this is thunder you can't steal. This is real thunder that it belongs to everybody. And that thunder is that if you want to know what this people of the more excellent way are, at the core, at the Shemot, at the Shem of the essence of who they really are, it's the 10 words. It's the things that are said in Exodus chapter 20. I am the Holy One, and these things. You are, will not, you will not, you will not. These are the essence, the core of who the people of the more excellent way are. The further we get from those and stray from that, the less excellent we are. We become the less excellent way. We become the Pharaoh way. We became the nations' way, the way of the raging nations, the way of the peoples that imagine a vain thing, which is Psalm 2. You see this reference in there. We have the choice. We really are given this choice by our Creator, the excellent way or the other way, the less excellent way. Yeshua phrased it in other terms you probably are familiar with. Yeshua said there is a narrow path that leads to life. There's a broad path that leads to death and destruction. And so this issue of the narrow way, the more excellent way, Shaul, Tarsus, called Paul by so many, the Holy One never said that was his name, but that's what he became to be called by other people. And he said, I show you a more excellent way. And he began to talk to us about this way of patience, of gentleness, of forgiveness, of love, of calmness, of staying calm in the face of aggravation, irritation, provocation, offense, and all those things, and about being patient and kind, and all the things that he defined in 1 Corinthians 13 about the lifestyle. That's the sort of a picture of the 10 words in capsule form. And if you want to see what that more excellent way people look like, you look at the example provided by Joseph. How he did not overreact to the things that were said and done about him and done to him, even to the extent of being put in prison, sold into slavery, put in prison, abused, beaten, called all sorts of names. He managed to overcome and override that. Then you can see the example, of course, of Messiah Yeshua himself, who, when reviled, did not revile back. He spoke only what his Father gave him to say. He did only what he saw his Father doing. We see this is the choice we have to make, and we have to make it on a moment by moment, situation by situation, interaction by interaction, transaction by transaction, and context by context basis. We have to keep making this decision to choose the more excellent way. The good news, the joyful thing about from what I'm hearing is that there is a more excellent way, and it's not hard. It's challenging from the standpoint of our mindset has to change. Our priorities, our values may have to change. Our vocabulary may have to change. But it's not hard when it comes right down to it. He gives us everything we need for life and for godliness, to become people of the more excellent way. And I am so thrilled that we get a chance to be spokesmen on behalf of this more excellent way, to hopefully to awaken your hearts as you're listening today, to say, I want to choose the more excellent way. The better way, the way of the Holy One, the way of the 10 words, the way of Joseph, the way of Messiah, the way of Yeshua in all things, and therefore to avoid becoming people of the least excellent way, the people of the way of Pharaoh, the people of the way of the world, and the raging nations, and the vain imagination peoples. Well, who's next? You're going to be introduced to Marcy now. I'm getting some comments that it's a little hard, the echo is a little bit bad, so kind of speak a little slowly if you could, Marcy, and help us out a little bit and loudly. Like you're talking to your class whenever you were teaching. How about that?
I will speak slowly. There's nothing that is insignificant in the Word of God. Everything has purpose and meaning and provides even a strategy. And this is just a comment, I was just kind of thinking about that number of 430 years that the Israelites were, the Hebrew people were held captive in Egypt as slaves. And that number 4, just doing some study, there are 4 expressions of redemption in the Torah. And what I said, he says, when God took the Jewish people out of Egypt, he said, I will take you out, number 1. Number 2, I will save you. Number 3, I will redeem you. And finally, it got very intimate. And he said, I will take you to me as a nation. And here I will take you to me as a bride. And it becomes so very personal then. But that number 4 is also the public, which is the door. And we know that Messiah is referred to in what we, refer to as the New Testament as these crosses of the door and all that. And we know that in the Jewish alphabet, every letter of that alphabet is a picture of a Messiah. And what he has come to provide and come to show us what his kingdom looks like. So I thought that was very interesting that this number 4 for 430 is the door. It's the way that we're going to be delivered out of Egypt. And there's only one way to our Father, and that's through the door of Yeshua Mashiach. And then the number 3 in the 430 years is the Gimel, which is the camel. And one of the things that the camel represented was a way of escape. And it was an animal that could endure a long journey through the desert, and living on what would look like in the natural something, very little water, but it would take him, and it would still be enough to sustain him. And this is the camel itself embodies the process of weaning and nourishing. And it's able to sustain itself on journeys of vast distances after being sufficiently watered. And so this to me is a picture of God saying, I will be the one that will sustain you in this journey, along this journey. I will give you everything that you need. I will supply her with rivers of living water. You will have everything that you need. And it also says that the gimel actually signifies the wealthy man running after the pauper. And again, that's just so intimate to me that we have these people that are in such need. They've been under such oppression. They don't even know who they are. They've been assimilated into a demonic system. And for 430 years, their ancestors are gone. And yet, they're hopeless, helpless. They're paupers. And here we have this charitable, loving God who has pursued them and made this way of escape. So just that number 430, the number of years that they were held captive, to me just speaks of their deliverance and their redemption and their salvation.
Yeah, I mean, we have this. Hebrew is such a beautiful language because numbers and letters are the same. Every letter has a numerical value. In addition, every Hebrew letter is a deep, deep motion picture. And you put them together, they become sequels and sequels and sequels. It becomes this great imagery is just working its way out in front of you when you read the Hebrew. Even when you don't understand it, the Hebrew is just, the pictures of the Hebrew are just call you deep unto deep. So I encourage those processes. Now, Marcy brought up the issue of the number of years that Israel was, the Bnei Israel, the seed of Israel, of the nation at least, was in I believe the reference was to captivity. We haven't talked much about captivity yet. We'll talk more about that to come. But I will say, and I think it's realized, that there are 3 different periods of years that are referenced as the period of time that Bnei Israel was in Egypt. And the first one was 430 years, or one of them was 430 years. Actually, the first one was 400 years, 430 years, and then 210 years. And so what was it? Was it 400? Was it 430? Was it 210? And people get caught up with the actual Arabic numbers, or the American way of thinking about things as far as numbers. And I will tell you this, yes, it was all of those. It was 430 years, it was 400 years, and it was 210 years. Now, and the Hebrew pictures of those have different pictographs, different meanings to you, and they go back to initial points of beginning, different points of beginning. For instance, the 430 years, what does it go back to? Because they weren't in captivity under the Pharaoh that commanded the deaths of the babies for 430 years. When was the seed of the covenant in Egypt the first time? And we should go back to, and how did she go into captivity? It was Sarah. Sarah was with Abraham, and this was 3 generations ago, multiple generations ago. And in the context of Sarah going into Egypt, she went into the harem. She went into the Pharaoh's captivity, and she was there. She couldn't leave. And so that first element of captivity, yes, it was 430 years. 400 is a summary of the 430, and the 210 is after Joseph's death, and as they begin to actually experience the hard throes, the deep birth pangs of the worst of the captivity, yes, that was the 210 years as mentioned. But each of these periods relates to a certain beginning point. And my father was a surveyor, an engineer, a civil engineer, and he always taught me that you start with the point of beginning. Everything you do on the field, in the land, you have to start with the point of beginning. From the point of beginning, you go thence, and then you go thence, and then you go thence, and then you go thence. But you have to start with the right point of beginning. So if you want to ask about yourself about the number of years, or about the beginning point of when really we begin to be touched and impacted adversely by the Egyptian society, it goes all the way back to our first visit there. Every time you touch these pagan, these dark, sinister, occult, focused, fixated, angry, offended societies, they have an impact. They make an imprint upon your soul. You can overcome this. God allows us to overcome this. But the memory of that, no one forgets the fact that even Sarah was a prisoner, was a captive. I would talk just a little bit about captivity. Captivity and exile are sometimes treated interrelated, as if they were interchangeable phrases. I don't see it that way, because the Hebrew words are different. Exile is galut, which means that basically you have either voluntarily left or voluntarily remain somewhere where you do belong. The land, you've not in your land, your actually homeland, you've gone somewhere else, maybe because you had to, but you could go back. At least you could go somewhere else. You're not trapped where you are. Exile, you means you're not where you're supposed to be, but you could go somewhere else and maybe even go home. Captivity is shavi in Hebrew. It's a different word altogether, and it's a lot darker because you can't go anywhere. You are totally under the manipulation and the control of the people in charge of wherever the land you are. And that's what we wound up with in Egypt. We couldn't leave anywhere. We didn't go back and bury the bones of Joseph. Joseph died, and his bones were left in a box unburied for all these years. Generations passed with Joseph's bones unburied because he had made everyone promise to him that they would not bury him in Egypt, though it was the land of tombs and pyramids and fixation on death and afterlife, fixation on how you inter people's remains. His box of bones, unburied bones, was a scandal to the society, but it was left there awaiting transport, awaiting something to happen in the future. And that becomes the essence. We are like those bones. The people of God are always like those dry bones, waiting for something to happen, waiting for an awakening to take place, waiting for the breath, the ruach, as in Ezekiel 37, to come forth and say, can these bones live? Oh, yes, they can live. Oh, yes. We can come out of captivity. And he says, when we come forth from captivity, and he returns captivity back to you, and we come back to Jerusalem, we will come as with laughter, with our mouths filled with laughter, rejoicing, like carrying our sheaves. This is the idea of learning that we can be, no matter what our situation is presently, no matter how bad the government may be, the society may be, the people may be, no matter how much we may be hated or disrespected or attacked or persecuted by other people, we are like Joseph's bones. They can't bury us, and we keep coming back, and whenever the breath of the Holy One moves, the bones come together, bone unto bone, and sinew comes upon that, and then we have the breath enter in the lungs. And we see Am Yisrael, the nation of Israel, lives. It's not a political entity. There's two words that are used to describe nation. They're called nation in the Hebrew. One of them, actually four of them, but two of the main ones. And two of them are Am Yisrael. Am Yisrael Chai, we sing the song. And the nation of Israel, the people of Israel live. Am, Ayin Mem, Silphite. And the other one is Goy. And Goy is the way nations introduced in the Bible. Chapter 10 of Genesis, we see these readings about. And these people went according to their language after the flood. They went out according to their language, according to their families, their households, their members, and they went out to their lands, and they went out until they became nations. They became goyim. They formed political systems. Goyim is about structure and form. The goy aspect of nation is about the infrastructure of the nation. It's about how you eat, the food you eat, and about the belief system, the basic core belief system. about your general principles of life, about your political system, about your legal system. It's about how the system works, and you share in this sort of organization structure. That's a goy. A goy, we're supposed to see that one form. And the am is the people within the forms, is the essence of the people who live within the forms. And so we have these two aspects of a nationhood. One is the fact that we have form and structure, we have infrastructure, but the more important part is the Am Yisrael, and that idea of us being the core people that are like the Exodus 10 words, the core people that are like Joseph, as we've mentioned before, the core people who pattern their lives after and behave like Yeshua whenever the stress is here and the trials come and the reviling and the persecution comes. That's the essence of becoming a nation. We're to see Israel has become both a goy, a structure, a nation, has its own cuisine, has its own legal system, has its own approach to life, core belief system, all the things that a nation has, even its own entertainment, own way of expressing itself in art and artistry. That's going to be a specific, we'll have that. Oh, but the most important thing is not the structure. Some people get distracted by that, the way it looks on the outside. The most important thing is what beats within our hearts. What beats within your internal heart and your spirit? What is in your neshama? What is there? What is coming forth? What do people see? What do people sense? What do people smell? What do people feel when they're in your presence? Do they feel a connection to the divine? Do they feel heaven is coming to earth in some small way? Or do they feel they just met another person, another with problems, with issues, with trials, who has a bone to pick and a chip on the shoulder? What do they feel? We are called to be Am Yisrael, the people who overcome and who bring the touch of heaven to the earth in all things. We have another Tony out there. Another question? Anybody else? Yeah. You're going to meet Troy. I'll remind you, Troy, they've been having some trouble listening to some echoes, so speak slowly if you can. And yeah, I'll let you go.
I'm just going to kind of read some things that you wrote in your archive writings, because there's such a richness there, and so many lessons to be learned. You said they were speaking of Moses and Aaron going into the big Pharaoh. You said they were here, but they were there on a kingdom of heaven mission, engaging in carefully scripted kingdom of heaven diplomacy. They therefore stuck to the kingdom of heaven diplomatic agenda and just read the script. Despite all things they might personally have believed and wanted to say to Pharaoh or in front of the Egyptian media of the day. And then above that, he had said there was a personal lesson that we each needed to learn. That personal opinions, biases, agendas, and talking points have to be put on the back burner and ultimately dipped out completely. Our heart must be completely flooded with our kingdom's noble theme. Our tongue must be the pen of a great writer, but which recite only the verses authorized by our King. Our mouths must become fine-tuned instruments of divine revelation. Wow. Not loose cannons, portals of opinion, ideology, philosophy, theology, moral revulsion, indignation, outrage, disdain, criticism, judgment, or condemnation. So as I read that, and I think our mouths must be fine-tuned instruments of divine revelation. Think about everything you said last week. And take a week. Everything you said, every word that came out of your mouth, and everything that came out of your thumbs and fingers on social media. And think about other people reading that. Would other people read that and say, man, that guy, he is an instrument of divine revelation? Or would they say something else? That's a sobering thought, isn't it? I think as far as me, I have a long way to go. So if you can kind of elaborate a little bit on how we become that, how we move from where we're at and become more and more of divine revelation and less and less of our opinions, our ideologies, our judgmentalism, and all the things that we're surrounded by while we're here in this exile.
Thank you, Troy. Wow. Okay, so I'll tell you, there's many levels, intricate levels of introduction and discussion of Torah, and particularly the book of Exodus and Moshe. Let's look at Moshe as the example. We could look at Torah so many ways. We could be fascinated by the events, and boy, some of the events are just stunning, world-changing events. But I always like to look at the personal level and the personal development. And Moshe is one of those people that you really love to watch because it's an amazing thing. He was not some superhero from the beginning. I mean, we had a discussion before you guys joined us for Torah Talks with Tony's and Bill today about Moshe's early life and his killing of the Egyptian and his arrogance, his ethnic pride, and our narcissism, and a way he had butted into conversations and troublemaking, and just didn't seem to have any conscience over killing this Egyptian and burying him in the sand, and all sorts of things about it. He started from a standpoint of privilege, but he learned how to. He learned through obedience through suffering, as someone else might say. I'll be said about somebody else. He learned how to Shema through learning how other people hurt. Well, and I want to talk about the fact that whenever he was called in this week's Parsha, the great, again, the event, the burning bush, the great revelation, the silence from heaven is broken after generations and centuries, and heaven speaks again, hasn't spoken since the days of Yaakov, and now heaven speaks, the voice of God is ringing out over the desert floor, and here's this little guy, this little Moshe down there, and the arrogant narcissist, after 40 years of wandering in the desert, taking care of his father-in-law's sheep, he's the one who gets to hear this voice. And whenever he's confronted and the discussion takes place, he says, I send somebody else. I'm Loish Devarim. I can't talk with words that have societal relevance. I just talk stuff. I just talk politics. I just talk philosophy. Loish, it doesn't mean he had a speech impediment, as some people have come to think. It means that when he talked, he had nothing to say. Most people in this world, they can talk till the lips turn blue. They have nothing worthwhile to say. They can post on Facebook or on social media over and over again. Nobody cares because it's just maddening because there's nothing being said. And Moshe says, Lo ish devarim, I am not a man of devarim. I'm not a man who can speak words that have societal impact, that have the touch and the breath of the Holy One in them. I can't do that. He said, oh, you will. I'm going to put my devarim in your mouth. It's interesting that the end of Torah, the fifth book of Torah, is called devarim, and it comes forth from guess who? It comes from the lips of the one who had no devarim when this whole thing started. You aren't expected to have devarim until you're touched by the Creator of the universe. But once you are touched by the Holy One, once His hand, once His mercy, once His grace, once His goodness, once His power begins to flow in you, then He puts words in your mouth. Powerful words, words that have relevance, words that have impact, words that have life in them. And that's the kind of words we're called to speak. That's why we're not called to speak like the rest of the people speak, about the issues the rest of the people talk about. We're not to get all emotional and all caught up in their outrages over physical things that are going to be different tomorrow. Will change anyway. We're not to speak truth to power. We're supposed to speak the words that He has put into our mouths whenever it's time to speak those words. And to limit and restrict ourselves to only what He has given to speak. Yeshua said it best. He said, I only speak the words my Father has given me to speak. I only do what I see my Father doing. This is that imagery of not just speaking things because we can, not being loose cannons, not being lone rangers, not being vigilantes who just find things we don't like about this world and spew about it and don't have any way of bringing any life or any solution or any fix into the scenario. Well, we're called to have that. We're called to be people of the more excellent way. That includes more excellent speech. It's staying focused, staying intent upon exactly what we're told to do and mission. And understanding that our words are not all that we communicate with. We also communicate with our tone of voice. the attitude with which we speak, even the cadence and the rhythm with which we speak, every aspect in our facial expressions as we speak. These are the things that help us communicate, and we need to reflect our Creator, reflect our Savior, reflect our Deliverer, reflect our Master, who is our King. We reflect Him by virtue of not just the words we speak, although that's critical, also the tone of voice we use, the rhythm we use it with, and the way we deliver it. Yeah, one more from Deb. Okay, this will be the last question for the day.
I just want to address that, flowing in the words of the Lord, that it says in Exodus 1:15, the king of Egypt told the midwives to kill the male Hebrew babies, the baby girls alive. The commandments were taught in Christianity as commandments. I've learned that they're a little more than that they are the 10 words of prophetic empowerment given by the Holy One to His people, and we are grafted into His people. And the words say, this is who you are. You are not a murderer, adulterer, a liar, etc. And the sixth commandment is the preservation of life. We aren't told for sure that these midwives were Egyptian or Hebrew, but they feared God and they preserved life, and they stood against the tide of darkness and violence and evil and self-centered focus. And the word in Scripture for this is Hamas. When we follow Torah and the Holy Spirit and the ways of Yeshua that He taught, Jesus, and when we are following that, we are the conduits of heaven touching earth and bringing the will of God into this darkness.
Amen. Amen. And while we're on the subject of the 10 words, and that being the constitution of who we are, the essence of what's at the core of the onion on each one of us is these 10 words, these 10 aspects. I want to talk about the one that's called remember the Sabbath. And keep it holy. But we think about the Sabbath, and you're listening to this, and I hope you're enjoying the conversation. I hope you've been able to hear and pick up on some of the things. And I hope the Holy One's speaking to you about your own calling and your own conversations and your own purpose on the earth. But I want to remind you just about this fourth instruction, which says, remember the Sabbath. The first thing He tells us to do about the Sabbath is not to rest. I think some forms of religion have taken the idea that if the Sabbath's anything, it's a day of rest. No, it's a day of remembrance. And the whole idea, the first thing, if you don't go through the remembrance process, and what are you to remember? Remember the seventh day. What was the seventh day? The seventh day was the day when all the earth was new and fresh, when there were possibilities endless, when there was no limitations, no restrictions, when the very scent and the fragrance and the signature of the Creator of the universe was everywhere, when beauty was waiting to be explored and developed, when humanity's possibilities and potential was untapped and yet ready to be exhausted, ready to be tapped into. Remember that. Remember before even Eden, but oh yes, Eden. Remember there's something more out there. And this is the first step of real Shabbat. If you want to do real Sabbath, if you want to remember the Sabbath, if you want this essence of who you really are to come out in this regard, in regard to Sabbath, understand it starts with remembering. That means you have to step aside from whatever's triggering you, whatever's worrying you, whatever's bothering you, whatever's exciting you. You have to step aside from worldly pursuits for a little while and clear your mind enough to start thinking about, when creation was fresh and new, when everything was possible, when there was nothing that was impossible, that was nothing, when corruption had not controlled everything. Can we go back to that world for a little while? And the whole idea of the Sabbath is to spend some time alone and then with each other and with your families, enjoying the freshness of possibility and of the presence and manifestations of the Holy One. and about his will and his ways being done, and human entity just waiting for the opportunity to do it. Well, remember the Sabbath, and then you will keep it holy, and then you will rest. And you will delight in it and all the things that he says to do. Well, it's time for us to leave you now. I hope you've enjoyed this little unusual episode of Torah Talk with Tony's and Bill. Until next week, Shabbat Shalom.